In this lecture, we're going to review some of the legal issues related to training and development, issues like labor and tax laws, equality, and accessibility. The first issue relates to legal compliance. We have to ensure that the training system complies with all state and federal laws. Some organizations have to report back to government entities the number of training hours that their employees complete and whether business outcomes like accidents or lawsuits were affected. For example, some states require all of their employees, whether they work in government offices or at public universities, to take ethics training or sexual harassment training each year. Educational institutions then have to report those numbers back to the state. In addition, some laws mandate a minimum number of hours that trainees must complete. Other mandates require trainees to participate in a certain number of classroom hours and a certain number of on-the-job training hours in order to receive their certificate. Another issue is whether trainees should be paid for participating in training. In most cases, the answer is yes. Under some circumstances, however, it may be an unwise investment for some organizations. The Fair Labor Standards Act provides some guidance. When these four conditions are met, companies may not be required to pay trainees for learning. When they voluntarily sign up for the training, when it takes place outside their regularly scheduled work hours, when it isn't directly related to their current job, and when the training does not involve them doing productive work for the employer. An employee who decides to go back to school online here at Maryville University, for example, is not legally entitled to tuition reimbursement from their employer. Another issue is whether training costs can be reported as business expenses. Many people think so, but the answer isn't so simple. It really depends. Generally speaking, they can when the training is for business purposes. If the training helps learners meet minimum job qualifications, or if the training helps them develop brand new skills that have nothing to do with their current job, or if the training helps them prepare for a future job, then no. The training costs cannot be reported as business expenses. A second tax law issue is whether reimbursements for training expenses need to be classified or claimed as income. In 2021, the first $5,250 is not taxable, but anything over that amount needs to be classified as compensation or claimed as income. Workers' compensation laws are also relevant to us. The employer is responsible for ensuring that before employees operate equipment or interact with the public, they have the minimum qualifications required by the job. If an accident or discrimination occurs without the proper qualifications, for example, the company could be liable for damages. Also, most states have enacted laws that require companies to compensate employees who are injured on the job, and this includes during training. Companies may have to pay trainees salaries or agree on a settlement. They may also be liable for non-training accidents that occur because employees were not properly trained, a fault known as negligent training. Not only does poor training waste resources and have little to no impact on learning, it can also lead to litigation. We also need to make sure that all employees have equal access to learning opportunities, whether we're talking about programs or activities. For years, minority groups have not had the same development opportunities as the majority group, a trend that impacted the advancement rates of minority members and contributed to the glass ceiling. Employees can take action against employers who prevent them from attending training based on their membership in a protected class. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination of employees based on race, color, religion, gender, and national origin. The Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967 prohibits discrimination of employees over the age of 40. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities, which now has a very broad definition. The Americans with Disabilities Act also requires employers to make sure that their training is accessible to individuals with disabilities. This means that the learning environment, including opportunities to practice and get feedback, are available to everyone. This law also requires educational institutions to make their e-learning courses completely accessible. These lecture videos, the slides, and other materials in this course have been carefully designed to be accessible by technology for visual and auditory impairments. Screen readers, for example, can recognize and transform the material so that it's suitable for the learner. Generally speaking, it is illegal to copy and use any copyrighted material in training without the owner's permission. In some cases, we may need to pay a fee in order to use certain materials in our programs. All of the images in this course came from sources that allow us to use them in this way. When a set of very specific conditions is met, the fair use doctrine comes into play, and a small amount of copyrighted material can be used without the owner's permission. Best practice is to create most training content and materials in-house and only use material from external sources that has been released for public use. The final legal issue relates to what we do with the data that we accumulate about employees and their learning experiences. Documentation and data are crucial to demonstrating that a training program complies with the law, that an unfavorable employment decision, like termination for example, was taken based on legitimate reasons, not discriminatory reasons. If we don't keep records, we'll have a more difficult time convincing the courts that we did everything in our power to make sure that we followed the rules. Thus, we should always inform employees when we plan to use their data to make HRM decisions. As you can see, there are a variety of legal considerations we need to make when designing and facilitating training programs. Ignorance is not bliss when it comes to employment laws.